Hello, friends, and welcome to this edition of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. I am your host, Paul Hudrick, and we are reunited, and it feels so good. My good friend from NBC Sports Philadelphia and the Sixers Talk podcast, Mr. Danny Pommells. Danny, it is so wonderful to see you, and I'm so grateful you came back on the Coming In for a Landing podcast.
My pleasure, bro. Glad to be here. The Sixers team, I think, might be turning a corner here as they try to play basketball without Joel Embiid. So I'm interested to see how they deal with this adversity. And the Utah Jazz game was a great thing before the All-Star break. And here coming out of it, they're continuing the momentum, which I really am excited about.
And that's where I want to start, Danny. It's kind of like a bittersweet weekend, I guess you would say, because the Sixers come out of the break on fire, win 3 straight games, by blowout fashion in each one. They do it in different ways, one without either Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, one without Ben Simmons, and then one without Joel Embiid. We find out in the Wizards game, Joel Embiid does suffer a bone bruise. So sigh of relief. Of course, for me at least, that's how I felt because, as Philadelphia people, we always, the first place we go is, here we go, MVP season ruined. He's out for the season. It's where we all go, and I get it. But it's our whole lives, Danny, right? I mean, this is the way.
Bro, they were making Carson Wentz comparisons. Relax.
That's what I saw someone say, like, in their lifetime. They've seen Chase Utley get his MVP season ruined by injury. Remember, he got hit by a pitch on the hand by John Lannon. And then, as you mentioned, Carson Wentz. And I'm like, man, like, we are just programmed to go to these dark places. And it's funny and sad at the same time. But, for me, it's a sense of relief. 2 weeks. No procedures need to be done. He just needs to rehab it. Doc Rivers said he's already got a game plan in place. So that's great news to me for the most part. You don't want to see him miss any time. But, Danny, I think, as you kind of alluded to, you have to be encouraged by the way they came out and stomped the Spurs. They are just playing really good basketball right now. So I guess what have you kind of seen in these 3 games? Like, what has stood out to you? What has impressed you most?
I definitely the ball movement has impressed me. I like the way they're sharing the ball. But you look at last night's game, it's like an outlier in a way because you're trying to look at these last 2 games and see what you can glean from it. But they have a game where they blow the team out. The Spurs, that's their worst loss in team history. The San Antonio Spurs, the Sixers beat them by 35, but they only have 5 guys in double figures. So it's like, you would think, I think they had 7 guys in double figures in the game before that. But it just, in your head, you're thinking oh, well, somebody must have had a big game or really showed out, but you didn't quite have, it was kind of a group approach to the victory there. But all in all, bro, what I am seeing the most of is that Tobias Harris has, whatever you want to attribute it to, whether it be Doc Rivers, the system, changing positions or what have you, he continues to show that he is playing at that all-star caliber level. And I don't know if he has a chip on his shoulder because he didn't make the all-star game or what is continuing to motivate him, because it's more or less show and prove that the first half was an anomaly and that you can do it here in the second half. And he's continuing to show the leadership, making the tough baskets and hitting threes in a timely fashion. So I'm waiting for them to turn it up a notch with the 3-point shooting. That's kind of the spot where I most of all feel a little trepidation. But I think that the way they play together as a team and the way they support each other is what I'm leaning on the most, because you see the Brooklyn Nets and these other teams that are out there stacking up some of these players and acquire these assets, and it makes you a little bit nervous. Oh, Daryl Morey, what you going to do? Daryl Morey, what you going to do? But I'm liking the way that they're playing as a unit and holding each other up and propping each other up here and overcoming this adversity as a team. And hopefully, these games are only getting tougher, right, Paul? So hopefully they'll continue to play that way. And yes, I was relieved so much to hear Joel, would be back in 2 weeks and it's just a bone bruise. And maybe that rest will, make him feel like he needs to push a little harder when he does come back or what have you. And then that'll elevate the team even more. But I'm cautiously optimistic and excited that they have risen to risen above the adversity and risen to the occasion.
Yeah, and Danny, I want to thank you because you pretty much almost like previewed the entire podcast. You hit on a bunch of little notes there that we're probably going to hit on throughout. So it's great, but uh, it's they just have to keep afloat, right? Like they don't. I think if he misses 2 weeks, he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So we'll see. Hopefully he's back in that span. We'll see. If he is, that will be 8 games, including last night. So 7 more. So
so he'll miss that whole West Coast trip.
Basically, yeah. But my thing is that you don't need them to go like if 8 games, you don't need them to go 6-2. You can't expect them to go 6-2. It's not realistic. If they go like 4-4, that's a win to me. You know what I mean? Like without Joel Embiid and that difficult stretch, if you go 4-4 and then he is back at game not like the 9th game, that's a win. Like you are in really good shape. I know the Nets are surging, like you already talked about. They're playing really good basketball. James Harden's playing phenomenally. Kyrie's playing great, and KD really hasn't played a ton, so they're really doing a lot of damage, mostly without KD. So it's scary to think about how good they can be. But the Sixers, like you said, Danny, just good team basketball, ball movement. I love their team defense. I think that Doc Rivers talked to us right, coming out of the break. He said the biggest things I'm focused on transition defense, which has been abysmal this year. That's the one thing I can point to the defense that has not been good, and their pick and roll defense. And he said that what I've noticed is like their weak side help has been excellent through 3 games. Like you're seeing guys, and when I asked Doc Rivers about that, he said, "Well, it all starts because we're playing better transition defense, so we're forcing teams to have to play in the half court, and when we do that, we're really hard to score against." The pick and roll defense was still a little bit shaky, but that's to be expected when you're missing Joel Embiid. You have Tony Bradley, who has been playing pretty damn well.
Surprise, right?
Yeah. You're not asking him to do too much, right? I mean, to me, I'm asking him to come in, give me energy, and not make mistakes. He does those 2 things, I'm good. I don't need him to score. I don't need set screens, rebound the basketball, and contest shots at the rim. That's it. I don't need you to do anything.
And he's looking for opportunities, though. He's looking for wherever he can get a bucket. He's running the floor. He slimmed down a bit.
25 pounds he lost. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I consider them just a throw in that Detroit trade. I didn't have high expectations, but the staff clearly had some expectations with him because they've incorporated him since he got here into getting minutes and filling in for guys. So, it always takes a little something from a couple areas, and suddenly, you've got this momentum and this energy behind you. And I see that building with them. Once again, though, it's these marquee matchups, which we're going to see a lot of these coming in the coming weeks that will really tell the tale. So I'm excited, but once again, cautiously optimistic.
Sure. I mean, and even like the next 2 games, they're at home, but they're tough. A surprising Knicks team on Tuesday, and then you have the Milwaukee Bucks, who are by all accounts, I believe they're Drew Holiday is back, and they've been at full strength. And when they're at full strength, they've been really good this year. They had a little bit of a rough patch, but that was without Holiday, and he's been great for them. That was such a great trade for them, and he's going to be such a big part of their team. And he's good in a 7-game playoff series to have to contend with him defensively and offensively. That was a huge get for them. Like I can't, it's so funny because I saw someone tweet it and I couldn't agree more. Like the upgrade from Bledsoe to Drew Holiday, it's so astronomical. Like how on earth did anybody think, oh yeah, like Bledsoe is a better defender than Drew Holiday? Remember that year that Bledsoe made the all first defense team? It's like, who the hell voted for? Like, why did that happen? Like Drew Holiday, I don't think made a team that year, which is just mind blowing because I think he might be one of, if not the best defensive pure guard in the NBA going right now. So, that's
the team I'm worried about, though. I'm worried about Milwaukee, though, Paul. They played them 3 times here in the second half, but they play Milwaukee 3 times here in the second half, including a back-to-back in April. And this road. So, and this Milwaukee game coming up is a nationally televised game. So, and they're minus Joel. So, and Milwaukee's breathing down their neck. So it's just a lot of variables there. And like you mentioned, them getting healthier and, Drew Holiday's impact. So they've mastered the regular season in the last couple of years. So they also have, that feather in their cap. So And the Sixers are kind of the wannabes in this situation because they want to be where, Milwaukee is. They want to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. They want to be competing for the title. So I'm curious to see how they respond to these teams. And you mentioned the Knicks game. I'm scared of the Knicks because I feel like they have kind of a bone to pick with the Sixers because of how they have been a team that's been kind of lesser than in the division in the past couple of years. And I see, what they're trying to do and the Julius Randle momentum and things like that. So, that's also a game I'm curious to see how the Sixers perform.
I don't think the Knicks have beaten the Sixers since Derrick Rose's first stint there.
There we go. Go. Well, I was surprised to hear about the fact that Washington was like a house of horrors for the Sixers. Yeah, they hadn't won there since like what 2013 or something like that.
You're right, and it's like the Thanos meme, though. What did it cost you? Everything. Gets hurt. But yeah, that was tough. But speaking of that game of the Wizards, we got to talk about Ben Simmons a little bit. So Ben Simmons didn't play in that game. He came back against the Spurs, and I thought a little rusty to start, but then he really in the second quarter really got it going. I thought he looked great after that. In a regular night, he probably has a shot at a triple-double. He had 14, 9 assists, 4 rebounds. When guys are making shots, that helps him rack up those assists in a pretty big fashion. But I thought he looked really good, in the second quarter once he kind of got going. I guess we'll start with how did you think he looked? He hasn't played because of the health and safety protocols from the All-Star break. And then also, he's still going to go back to his barber, Danny. Do you have that kind of loyalty with the guy who gets you right?
I don't know, man. I guess the barber must have really sang the right song and told him, oh, it was a mistake. I bumped into such and such who, got me sick or what. I don't know what happened. And I don't know why him and Joel are staggered. I guess they went to the barber on different days or whatever, but
they're probably trying to be safe by doing that. And then it worked against them.
And he ends up infecting both of them or potentially infecting both of them, for contact tracing. But, I think they pointed out in the broadcast, if we're giving all of these other guys on the broadcast, Mark Zumoff and Ala Abdel Nabi, if we're giving these other guys, a reprieve from coming back from the All-Star break and being rusty and whatnot, we got to give that same reprieve to Ben and trying to get his legs under him as well. But, I saw him trying to be a playmaker, which is what he does. So, he seemed to be in his lane and in the pocket of where he is and how he plays, assisting on 3-point shots, which is something that he brings to the table. And I think when Ben is out there at his best, he's doing it on both ends. And, that little flex he did after that dunk, he's not always, trying to showboat or like, bring attention to himself in that way. So I think we're continuing to see that progression, that growth, that it's kind of like it was a few games back, in the regular season where, he had that 42-point game against the Jazz. He didn't play the next game. But then you're kind of starting to see some things click. Like he's different. There's things about him that are changing. And, last night, notwithstanding, I'm thinking that will continue to be what we'll see for the rest of the season is little things that start to like, whoa, like, okay, Ben, like the aggression and him trying to, take on some of the onus in the half court as well, which is something we haven't seen. And I think that if he can continue to be like that, whoever that player or those players are that come into the Sixers from the trade deadline or the buyout market or what have you, I think they'll be more, come into the fray and be much more excited because Ben is being aggressive and they know Joel is in MVP mode. So it'll be like more of like, okay, like everyone get on board and let's make this push. So I'm excited about what Ben's bringing. I'm so upset about what happened at the All-Star game because I was looking forward all week to seeing them play against the best players in the NBA. And
I can't lie. I was good with it because I really didn't have to pay attention to the All-Star.
I was salty, man. I still didn't. I like boycotted the first half, but like I got like my phone started blowing up when Steph and Dame started going nuts and hit half court shots. So then I I turned it on and my son came downstairs. But I feel you. That is definitely was an advantage of them not playing in the All-Star game because they got the rest and things like that. But I'm looking forward to the second half, and I think Ben, he's front and center at the moment, and I think him and the aggression and the things that he's been showing this could help him in a way because it gives him the exposure to actually be the man without Joel. Like he's forced into that role. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes that's the way players respond when they have to show and prove.
You mentioned the flex and the getting the crowd into it after he had a couple dunks last night.
Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? Like they weren't just, oh yeah, he put a little flavor on them. Like they had a little something.
Well, you got this dude from the Wizards dragging them for no reason. I bet he's probably like, you know what? Like I'm gonna show you guys what I can really do.
I'm going to get to that, but but no. One thing that you mentioned, like I said, you mentioned that him flexing and him showing a little bit of that emotion, a little bit of fire, and he's talked so much about like his mental mindset and how different it is. I have a theory.
Mm-hmm.
We've all talked about how much Sam Cassell has helped Ben Simmons, and you see it before every game. He is out there with Sam Cassell getting up shots. They're working on his game. They're talking about his game, talking about ways he can improve. Danny, you and I are old enough to remember Sam Cassell at the peak of his powers when he was really good.
Yeah.
Sam Cassell was one of the, and I mean this in a complimentary fashion, he was one of the nastiest, meanest, most competitive players on the court every single game. Because I remember I hated him. Because that Milwaukee
you used to hate Sam Cassell?
Yeah, dude. When Sam was on Milwaukee and they played the Sixers in that Eastern Conference Final, I couldn't stand Sam Cassell. But he's the kind of guy that if he's not on your team, you hate him. But if he's on your team, you absolutely love him. Because
super crafty, shot maker, been around the block. Yeah, the whole bit.
Exactly. And I think those are like the kind of the not quite intangible things, but things that maybe you and I, the average person, can't see that are affecting Ben Simmons' games. But I think it's just like these little nuances in Ben Simmons' games that Sam Cassell is kind of getting to and kind of unleashing. And I think part of that is like this mean little nasty streak that Ben has right now, where he's not messing around. Like my favorite play was in the Brooklyn game. I talked about this a couple times. He dunks on Tyler Johnson and then gets in Tyler Johnson's face and picks up a technical. I'm like, I'm good with that technical, man. Because I want to see him do that stuff. Like I want to see him be a little mean and be a little feisty. Like that's how you're supposed to. Like I love that about him. Like, and I think it's always been there. And I just think he's just kind of unleashing it. And because he's always been very competitive. He's always played hard. But now you're just just angry. And that triumph emoji that he puts out before every game, that he is personifying that right now, like every night.
I don't know if we're ready for a 6'10" dude with a mean streak, like a 6'10" point guard with a mean streak. That might just turn the Sixers fan base, to turn it all the way up. And Sam Cassell is doing the most teaching of any coach on that sideline, bro. You talk about him and them before the game, but he is always vocal and standing up and, being demonstrative and trying to, get guys in line and on the same page as far as, assignments and things like that. So you can see the head coach in him, and you can see, obviously he was up for a couple of jobs and didn't get them, and Doc brought him in, and it just is a perfect fit for me because of the young players that the Sixers have who can learn so much from him, being a savvy guard, like you mentioned. And I think that's a good comparison, man. I'm all about it. Ben, you mentioned Brooklyn, and we go back to the playoffs a year ago where, Ben, criticized the fans and then came out that next game and kind of had a chip on his shoulder and really played well. And he thought that he was being slighted in the Jazz game because Rudy Gobert was guarding him, and he went out and had 42. So I'm just saying that to say that, whatever that is, can we get that all the time? And I'm pointing to my shoulders because I imagine the chip being here, but can we get that all the time? And I think we are. We're starting to level up in a way. And it's just like, I don't know, Sixers fans out there, every game I'm excited to watch. And sometimes you're disappointed because some players are out or whatever, but it's just you're seeing the growth, I think, where in the past seasons we weren't always sure we would see that growth. And I don't know if you just attributed to Doc or just natural, maturity among the players, but whatever it is, they're winning games they wouldn't have won, last year. Particularly, give Doc credit and his staff credit for making adjustments, like against the Pacers when they went to a zone late and ended up winning that game. But whatever it is, man, they are changing the way they execute when it matters, and they're getting wins, and not wins that they wouldn't have gotten in past situations. So I'm enjoying it, man.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about like Ben and like like having the chip and all that, and we watched The Last Dance, and we all saw like Michael Jordan, who is by most accounts, if not the greatest player of all time, certainly the greatest player of his era. That dude found everything to get to piss him off and get competitive about it. He literally made stuff up to make himself get fired up. So like that's some people will be like, oh, well, Ben Simmons, why can't he just play like this all the time? He just like, why does he need to have? Well, every guy needs that. Every player needs that. Michael Jordan is arguably the greatest player ever, and he need that to the point where he made shit up in order to get himself fired up. So it's not just, I hear you. Like, yeah, I would love to see him play like that every night. But this comment that the Wizards play-by-play guy makes, that was in the back of his mind. He posted it on Instagram. He was not letting that guy off the hook for that, and it clearly fired him up. And I'm all for it. Use every little thing you can to motivate you and give you that little extra boost. I am all for it. You saw Joel Embiid calling out reporters right before the break after the Utah game. I am all about it. Get angry, get pissed off at everybody, get pissed off at the world, and use it on the court. I'm all about it.
I was a little surprised about Ben's comments after the game, though. The fact that he addressed it directly about the guy, about the Instagram post, about the whole thing.
Announcer.
Yeah, and he makes his Instagram post, calling the dude a casual with the robe on, and that just like, man, it just I'm surprised he talked about it directly like that. But again, man, I just think we're seeing some switches flip and some maturity, because I think he's understanding his role, who he is, and what he can and can't say, or attribute it to what you want, but he is becoming a better version of himself in my eyes.
Yeah. Well, listen, Danny, it was petty, but I think you and I both
sometimes it needs to be that way.
Exactly.
Sometimes it needs to be that way.
Sometimes petty is funny. But listen, I want to a couple more things before I let you get out of here. We talked a lot about through the course of the season, the starting five. You got great games against San Antonio out of Danny Green and Kyle Lowry. Wow, there's where my brain is. Danny Green and Seth Curry. They play. They were both excellent.
I was shocked, man. I did not expect that game to go that way.
Yeah,
that surprised me.
Nor did I. Yeah, nor did I.
Yeah.
The Spurs didn't have DeRozan, to be fair, but obviously the Sixers were missing the MVP of the league. So,
and we've seen games when teams were depleted and they played down to the competition. So
yeah, but yeah, so the starting five looks pretty darn good. When you look at advanced metrics, they've been a plus. I think some people have been a little bit maybe harder on Danny Green than they should be. I think he's actually playing better than what people kind of perceive. Seth, I do think that COVID stint it messed him up physically. And
he said his legs are just back. Yeah,
you could see it, and you could see it, Dan. He's got way more jump. He's got way more burst and explosiveness. Like, he just looks way better out there. So I think that's a factor. So I like the starting five, but obviously the Kyle Lowry talk is out there. It's talked about by everybody. Do you think they need to do that, or do you think that needs to happen? Like, they need to just do whatever they have to do to get Kyle Lowry out of Toronto? Or do you think, no, like, let's roll with the starting five because it has been so good, and let's just, help that bench out and give Doc Rivers a couple more options?
Starting five has been great. No denying that. You can play revisionist history, which is always dangerous. But I'm trying to stay in the present at the moment and not look in the past or try to predict the future. But man, they were 7-1. They were 7-1 at one point, and then Seth Curry has this COVID issue against Brooklyn, and then like everything changed. But they were able to stave that off, and here we are now. And I, to your other point about Danny Green, I need to admit that I'm guilty of not giving him the credit he deserves, and considering him as making less of an impact than he is. He comes out and hits his first 4 shots, 3 threes against the Spurs to set the tone. Where I've been critical of him is his off the dribble game, where when he pump fakes that 3 and tries to put it on the floor, like it gets disastrous at times and it doesn't work out for the team. But I think his defense, you go back to the whole 3-and-D idea, like he is filling that role. He is that for them, and in a way that they haven't had someone who can be dependable from the outside like he has been. And so I'm saying all that to say, I always considered his role as a place where they could upgrade or get better. Like, man, they could bring in a better player who can fill Danny Green's role.
Kyle Lowry.
Well, you know what? But the thing with Kyle Lowry though is I wouldn't balk at trying to get him. I would try to acquire him if they could, because he brings the experience, he brings the defensive savvy with the drawing the charges and the flopping, all due respect. But he also, brings the shot making and the 3-point shooting that I think is a supreme sore spot for them, because, bro, they're not going to make 15 of 29 threes every night, because they shoot, if Utah's at the top shooting 45, 46 threes a game, and the Sixers are near the bottom shooting 29 a game, 28 a game, they need to bridge that gap between, with the player they acquire, is what I'm saying. So whoever they acquire needs to be to be able to put up more threes in order to keep them in games or bring them back in games when they're down, because we've seen teams do that against the Sixers this season. The three-point shot bring them back in games against the Sixers. So would I make the Kyle Lowry trade? Yes. What would it cost me? Matisse, Maxey, a pick. I'm fine with that stuff. I just wanted to impact the roster and the starting 5 in the proper way. So you bring in Kyle Lowry. So does Seth Curry go to the bench? Do they trade Danny Green, and then Tobias moves to the 3 and Ben to the 4? And like, how does that part is where I want them. I want to figure out, because I think what these other teams have that the Sixers don't is a lot of interchangeable pieces, like the Bucks, like Boston, like the Nets. But the Sixers right now have pieces that they can move around. Doc can, reposition guys, or, have 3 starters sit and keep 2 out there and still have a viable lineup. But I'm a guy who I have my eye on, who I think might make an impact, is like Will Barton. Because he's a bucket, man. He is a freaking bucket, and his stock is a little low because of the exposure they're giving to other guys on the Bucks roster. So a perfect example is you see the kid Beasley go to Minnesota and average 20 a game, where he was in mothballs on that Nuggets roster, right? I mean, we talked about this in the past. Like he gets exposure and opportunity and turns into 20 points a game. Will Barton already can score and shoot and do all those things, but he's a creator. He's a wing defender. He's long. He checks a lot of boxes. So I'm thinking that they might be able to get a few guys. Maybe they buy low, get these buy low guys like DeLon Wright, like Will Barton, or guys in the buyout market. Man, I would love LaMarcus Aldridge to be here, but I feel like he'll end up in LA. It's just that I feel like you see Dwight and his excellence, playing at his peak last night. That's like, if you could get that every night, you wouldn't ever think about.
He's been much better, because I know he was not finishing to start the season. He was missing a lot of dunks, a lot
it's
of
a running joke.
But listen, over the last few games, he's been finishing them all, and he's been finishing them all pretty. So I don't know, maybe his legs, maybe he just wasn't. Maybe he needed that All-Star break to kind of rejuvenate.
Can we leave the 3-point shots alone though?
No, yeah. Well, listen. In his defense, he only shoots them when the shot clock's winding down. You have to give him that. He's only doing it when the shot clock's winding. The last one was really ugly. But listen, the bench as a whole has been playing great. They really have.
Yeah, when they miss Shake big time
Oh
for a
yeah.
long time, and people were pounding them, saying, "Oh, the benches are horrible," not thinking that
Hey,
Shake
guess
wasn't
what? They
there.
miss Mike Scott too, as much as people maybe don't want to admit that. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
just a
he
veteran
filled
guy who
well.
makes things go.
Well, we see him sometimes in that small ball five role. You bring in a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge off the bench, and then maybe Dwight Howard's not playing at his best, or you want to use him in a different way. You got LaMarcus Aldridge as another guy to lean on. So it's just like I'm hoping that's probably the most optimistic thing I feel about this team is that Daryl Morey's pulling the strings, the best front office guy they've had in there in a decade. So I look at him as like this is the time for him to earn his pay, so to speak. Like he did it before the season and maneuvering for Seth Curry, trading Al Horford and all that stuff. And then here we are, March 25th trade deadline. What do you got for us type of thing?
Yeah. And, I'm not as big on the idea. I hear you on LaMarcus Aldridge a little bit, but I do think he probably fits better somewhere like Boston, maybe, where, they really need a big to step up. And like,
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Listen, and he could potentially earn big minutes there. So I think maybe he could see that opportunity, maybe that being a better opportunity for him to be on a competitive team, but also play a pretty large role. If he comes here, his role is not defined. Like we don't know. Like, yeah, like Doc really likes what Dwight Howard's bringing, and the offensive rebounds, the screening and rolling. Like Doc really likes all that. So exactly. So I don't know that Doc would be eager to want to supplant him with LaMarcus. I love that dude. It was so good.
The goggles. When you put the goggles.
So good. But listen, I the name you mentioned, I think is great. Will Barton. Like you think about, with all due respect to Furkan Korkmaz, you put Will Barton in Furkan Korkmaz's place and play him with Shake Milton. That's a dangerous bench combo that you could play that would score a lot of points.
Look at what the Nets are doing, man.
I know. That's what I'm saying. You need firepower. Yeah, I agree.
You gotta adjust.
Like, so let's say they swing and miss at Kyle, because I agree with you that if I have a chance to get Kyle Lowry, I'm taking it. I think you have to, because I think, but I don't know if there's any other guy I would, but he is a guy that if they can pry him away from Toronto, yes, you do it.
How do you see it fitting though? I'm curious how the role.
I wouldn't. So for me, I'm not giving up Matisse. I just wouldn't do it. Maxey, and like I would sooner give up Maxey and multiple first round picks than I would want to give up Thibault, just because I think Thibault, if you do that trade, you slide Thibault right into the starting five, and then you have Kyle Lowry, Thibault, and Ben Simmons. And guess what? Kyle Lowry gets Kyrie Irving. You throw Matisse
Thibault
on James Harden, and then you put Ben on Kevin Durant. And you match up listen, no one's going to stop that team, but you match up better than probably anybody in the league with those three players if you roll those guys out. And then also, speaking of the Nets, another guy I try to get PJ Tucker, because at the very least, I think PJ Tucker could play a big role in that kind of series, because he can D up. Probably not Kyrie. Kyrie's probably a little too slippery for him, but he could D up James Harden. He could D up Kevin Durant well enough that he could give those other guys a break and give you some tough minutes, and he'll play physical and he'll play hard, and he'll play playoff basketball. So to me, like, Kyle Lowry, of course, if you can get him, great. But if you can't, if you get like a Will Barton and a PJ Tucker, man, those are two pretty damn good
that's
players.
A big upgrade.
Yeah.
Big upgrade.
And then maybe you can get a guy in a buyout market. You don't want to bank on that because you don't know who's going to be available. But like, if an Otto Porter Jr. happens to fall, get bought out in Chicago, or JJ Redick's been brought up a lot. Like, one of those guys could certainly give you. And it's not, to me, Danny, it's not about necessarily replacing guys. It's about competition, and it's about chess pieces that will fit. So when Doc Rivers has a playoff series, and hey, this, Matisse Thybulle, maybe he's getting a little too jumpy, he's committing too many fouls, making too many mistakes. Well, guess what? I got PJ Tucker I can roll with, and maybe give him some minutes and let him get a tough defense. You know what I mean? Like, just having that optionality that you can match up, or hey, our bench unit, we're not hitting any shots. Cool. Let's throw JJ Redick out there and have him just bomb a few threes. Like, I think that's what I want to see. I want to see guys that just gives Doc Rivers options. Will Barton, to me, though, that would be the guy. If he is available, if I can't get Kyle Lowry, he would be number 2 on the list.
I've seen the movie with JJ Redick before. I don't like the ending, so I'm going to pass.
But he's not playing that role. He's not. But listen, he's not playing that role. He's doesn't have to close the games anymore. If you throw him in for like 10, 15 minutes and just tell him to run around
Can they hide
as
him?
fast as he can. Yeah, no, I think
They
that's
have
the
to
thing.
hide him a little bit.
Not only do I think they can hide him in some matchups, they don't. If he isn't, they don't have to play. Like previously, they had to play him because he was one of their
Good
best
point.
5 players.
Good
He
point.
is not that. If he comes back here now, he is just a reserve who, when you need shooting, you can go to him.
And the thing I think, which I've kindly, come to grips with, is like, I guess there's no better person to tell you, hey, we're going to bring you off the bench than your father-in-law. So I guess Seth Curry really won't have like that much to say if like his father-in-law is telling him, starting to line up.
It's not like he's still going to play a big role. And like, he came off the bench late. Like, I don't think Seth's going to take it any kind of way. I don't think he's that type of guy. I think he's a guy who's had to, fight and grind for every opportunity he's got. Like, despite his last name being Curry, he's had to fight and grind for every NBA opportunity he's gotten. So I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to feel any kind of way about coming off the bench. I think he'll be just fine. But Danny Pommells, I want to let you go, man, because you've already graciously given me more time than we agreed upon. You're a very kind man, and I appreciate you so much. I look forward very
Always
much
a pleasure, Paul.
Yeah, I want to see you again in person real soon. Eat some Angela's pizza whenever he's up and running again. And eat some wings too. I got a great wing spot at Dom's Tavern, bro.
You don't even have to sell me on it. I'm already there. So I appreciate it as always, bro.
Absolutely. Danny, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everyone for checking out the Coming In for a Landing podcast. Please rate, download, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I am your host, Paul Hudrick. You can find me on Twitter at Paul Hudrick. Hit me up with questions. Just want to talk some Sixers, please feel free. But until next time, I will talk to you guys soon.